I do know that my gift is treating animals, and I'm giving them a piece of that gift in that moment, and I'm sure it is for a lot of them a big help. And maybe as much as helping their pet in that moment, I think it gives them, like, it restores some faith in them that people are still good.
Hi, it's Steph, and that was the voice of KWANE Stewart, and he is a doctor of veterinary medicine. His work in that field has changed over the course of his 23 years of practice, and he has worked in clinics and shelters and on the streets too, serving the pets of homeless populations in various parts of California. Some of the things that KWANE has observed on the streets may surprise you and warm you, and also inform you to the plight of the homeless. Because to offer a free service to these pets is not purely a service to the pets, of course, but to their owners. And it's a very generous act of love. We talk about KWANE's upbringing in New Mexico, his loving parents, and early exposure to pets, to the times he got a little wild in high school, and how those memories may have whispered a message to him that he hears to this day. This episode is about pets and about people and about purpose. Oh, and once you listen to the very end, I always share an example of another door opening from my own life, sometimes a big door, sometimes a small door. But it's a very good practice in trying to observe when we have had turning points in our lives. So if that interests you at all, please stick around. This is the Another Door Opens podcast, and I'm your host, Stephanie Himango. Here is KWANE Stewart.
I'm a veterinarian, doctor of veterinary medicine.
And you're known as the street vet, and a nickname like that doesn't just happen. Can you just tell me briefly what you were doing when this name kind of came about for you?
Yeah, I can make it a long story or a short story, but I guess the short version is I have been caring and treating pets of the homeless now for many years, setting up clinics, but more oftentimes just walking the streets. I'll just pack a medical bag and I'll walk the streets looking for our homeless folks, and those that have pets, I will just approach them and ask if I can treat their pet. And after doing this for a while, it just started to catch on, and now that's what I'm known as, I guess.
And I'm curious about what motivated you to sort of get out of the office and onto the street. I think it's one thing to have that care and have that ambition, and then it's another to go out and show up again and again and again. When did this street work begin for you, and why?
You know, you have these sort of lightning in a bottle moments in our lives, and I'm not sure what exactly sparked it, but when I decided to go out and set up a little table near a soup kitchen one day, and this is going back, around 8 years ago, I thought it was going to be a one-off. But yeah, on this day, I just set up a little table near a homeless food bank, and whoever had a pet, I called over and said, "I'm a veterinarian, and I'm offering help to your pet at no cost if you would allow me." And I got a little line formed in front of me. And estimates say that about 25% of our homeless own a pet, and that seemed to be
Hmm.
true in this line of maybe 40 or 50 people.
And where in the country were you doing that?
I was in Central California. I was in Stockton when I did this first clinic. And the reason I did it, to answer your question, is I was a shelter vet at the time, and I had realized there was just a big need in my own neighborhood, my own community, for the underserved or economically challenged or homeless. And I think for a lot of veterinarians, unless you get out of your practice and you do more work in the public sector, public service, I should say, that it's then that you realize or see this. Because prior to, for many years, and I've been, veterinarian for 23 years, prior to being a shelter vet, I wasn't really aware. And, in some ways I was naive looking back. I just wasn't aware of what was going on in my own backyard. And when I became a shelter vet, working in a municipality, then you see the strays coming in, you see the hit by cars, you see the people who can't afford rabies vaccines, and I knew then there was a lot going on that needed to be addressed.
When you set up that table that day and that first line formed, what kind of reactions did you get from people who stood at your table and said yes to your offering?
Well, they were just so grateful. I mean, it when something comes as a surprise to somebody like this typically does when I just approach someone out of the blue, it's amazing how overwhelmed, how grateful they feel in that moment because they weren't expecting it. They weren't expecting someone to just walk up and say, "Hey, I see you have a pet, and I'm here to help." And for a lot of these homeless people, their pet is their whole world. So to get that offering, yeah, you just I could see it on their face, and it meant a lot to me. I felt so good. So going back to what I was saying, I didn't think I was going to do it again. It just made me feel so good, and knew that I was really having a big impact on these people. That's when I decided to do it again and again and again.
What is your mindset now that you're going out into the street and it's not inside a shelter and you don't know what you will encounter each time you set out? What is your mindset like as you head out the door?
Yeah, so my mindset that has been an evolution because in the beginning, when I decided to actually start walking the streets versus going to designated locations, I wasn't sure what to expect. You have to understand that some of these areas don't feel safe. You don't know what's around the corner. I'm walking down alleys and under bridges, and um, sometimes you're just not sure what you may run into. And I had my own little rule. It's called the sundowner rule. I wouldn't do it after dark. I need to be able to see what's around me and be aware of my surroundings. And yeah, in the beginning, I was a little nervous at times. At Skid Row in Los Angeles is
Mhm.
an area that is hugely populated with homeless people, more so than I think any place in the country. You'll see people on a corner shooting up, and you'll see needles on the ground, and it feels a little bit like The Walking Dead. This squared off area in downtown LA, just broke down cars and papers blowing and people walking and riding their bikes in the middle of the street. It's really bizarre. That experience in Skid Row, it made me nervous, and I wasn't sure what to expect. And this again, going back years ago. But as you do it more and more, you just gain a comfort, and people sort of recognize you. They know you're there for a good reason. They don't hassle or bother you. I kind of have my sea legs now. Obviously, I'm somewhat of a street walking veteran,
Mhm.
and I'm just used to it now, and I like it.
What are some of the most common ailments you treat in these pets that live on the streets with their owners?
It's a lot of what you will see with your own pet. So for Southern California, we see a lot of fleas. So many cats and dogs have fleas. It's no different with the homeless population. Allergies are a big issue in California because of the seasons and elevation being close to the water and so forth. So that can cause skin irritation, ear infections, a host of problems. People want to assume that because they're homeless, their dog or cat is going to be in terrible shape. That is not the case. More times than not, we'll see well to do people, middle class people, come into my clinic and their pet is in worse shape than most of the pets I see on the streets. And you say, how could that be? Well, how is that? Well, these people, these homeless people, will sacrifice just about anything to keep their pet healthy. Their pet is really their lifeline for a lot of these people. They'll sacrifice their own food, what little money they have for medical care. They're very keen to any changes in their pets. We go to work for 8, 10 hours a day, right?
Mhm.
We're busy on weekends doing birthdays and happy hour and traveling vacation. These people are with their pets every hour of every day. When something is wrong, whether it's behavioral or medical, they catch on to it very quickly. So they don't let things drag on. I've seen people come into my clinic that have their pets had an ear infection for 6 months, and I think, how do you neglect this for that long? I don't see that commonly with homeless people.
That is so fascinating. And that's something I saw that you have commented on in some of your Instagram posts, and I'm glad you touched on it. I actually wanted to ask you about that. So, despite their tough living conditions, many of these animals probably have a better life than they do in a more well-off home.
In many, many cases, that's the truth. Now, there are exceptions, of course, but more times than not, no, these people take remarkable care of their pets. And the other area where they have us beat, and I already touched on it, is again, they're with their pet all the time. And to our pets, we, the pet parents, the owners, are their whole universe, right?
Yeah.
You think about it, again, we go to work and they sit pining for us. They're waiting. They hear the garage door open. They hear the keys jiggle in the door, and they get excited. I mean, they literally just wait and wait and wait for us to be around. And yes, these homeless people are with their pets all the time, every day, and the bond I see between them is unlike any bond I see with the average pet owner by far.
Wow. You know, there's obviously such a huge human factor to this service you're providing. What do you see in the eyes of these pet owners when you show up and express interest in helping their pet and ultimately helping them with no strings attached?
There's emotions, there's tears, I guess, on both sides.
Hmm.
I've gotten, and I'm going to try and not get choked up now as I think about some of the people I've met, but you sort of form a very quick and immediate uh, relationship with them because you're providing something that's so important and so intimate, really, um, to them and for them. Oftentimes they're sharing their life story with me and what brought them to the streets, and I'll share personal stories about myself with them. And when we say goodbye, I feel like I'm saying goodbye to a friend a lot of times, and I think they do too. So yeah, it's we've had our moments, I guess, on both sides.
Do you have a part of you that's kind of, but for the grace of God, go I, you identify with them, you have a level of compassion for them because you realize that nobody is really that far away from being in that exact same spot?
You're right. That has probably been the biggest learning lesson for me since I started doing this. Is you know if it not for the support of friends and family, I think many of us are one bad decision away or one bad luck bounce away from maybe being homeless ourselves. It can be that immediate. I realize that now when I see people on the streets that have master's degrees, had great jobs, good lives, and then maybe they fall into some depression and that leads to drugs and lose the support of their family and they're on the streets. Or one lady, she was chasing her dream to be an actress in LA, and she came out here with her boyfriend. They had a dispute, and he left, and she was sleeping in her car for a few weeks, and then eventually on the curb in a tent.
Mm.
And now, almost 2 years later, she was still there when I met her and her pet. And she says, I'm working. I pick up odd jobs and I work when I can. And you would know she was homeless. She didn't fit sort of this image of a homeless person. She was cleaned up and, you know, very articulate and friendly and was holding her dog and dressed fairly nice. I wouldn't have known she was homeless, but she was living right there on that street corner. And she said, no, I'm still chasing my dream and I'm going to make it happen. I just sort of hit a bump in the road, and when my finances went down, my credit went bad, and then I was having trouble getting an apartment. So it, made me realize, wow, just something so simple as bad credit can keep you out of a home or an apartment in LA when, you have 15 people in front of you with better credit. So I don't think it's as difficult as we think to end up where some of these people are. And for that reason, I caution people to judge them and show a little more empathy.
Has your awareness and your understanding of what creates homelessness increased through your work?
Yes, without a doubt. Yeah, getting to know these people, hearing their stories, you learn a lot, and yeah, there's gain in empathy and compassion, but just experience and understanding. And I, I'm asked this, and I try to reflect a number of times. Why, why homeless people, or why this population of people? And I think I've always had some empathy towards the less fortunate. And I'm not sure if that sort of ties into my work with animals, who are sort of helpless and and need someone to step in, look after them. I'm not sure if it's linked to that, but I do know I had experiences with homeless people going back to high school,
Mm.
because I was a little bit of a delinquent, I guess, for lack of a better word. I was struggling with my grades and skipping school, and running with a pack of friends, drinking, and just just was not on a good course. And oftentimes we'd find ourselves downtown, asking homeless people. This is back in the '80s, mind you, back when you could find people sort of pull out liquor for you. Could you go in and you give them money and they go in. So we knew we could always source like a homeless person to do that for us, and they'd go in and pull out alcohol for us. And sometimes we'd sit right there with them in the alley and drink and exchange stories. And we're talking, I was maybe 16, 17 at the time, right? Silly, just stupid behavior. But I look back on some of those moments, and there were flashes of friendship with some of them. We'd get to talking, and you get to know them, and and oftentimes we'd come back and bring lunch to them. But in some cases, they're almost like friends. Like we knew their names, they knew us, and I guess if I had to point to one time in my life that sort of had this ripple effect or led to what I'm doing now, and maybe some of those experiences I had back then.
That is so interesting. And I'm glad you sort of went back in time there because I wanted to ask how you got here. Let's jump back in time a little to your youth in New Mexico. Where did you grow up there and what was home life like for you?
Yeah, in a nutshell, normal upbringing, normal parents. I have one younger brother, one sibling, 7 years younger than I, and we were probably an ordinary middle class family in Albuquerque. Um, so no blame on my parents. They were great parents. They did a great job. I just like some adolescents, you just find yourself straying the course a little bit, and I'm not sure. Friends are so influential at the time, and my group of friends, that's just what we chose to do. But my parents were great. I'm biracial. So my dad is black and my mom is white. And my dad was a standout athlete from Louisiana, was recruited as one of the first black football players to ever play at the University of New Mexico. This is late '60s. At 20, he met my mom, who was 18. And about a year and a half later, I was born. So I was born to very young parents, still in college, unmarried, who were struggling a little bit at the time. Then my dad was drafted to play football. He played for a short while in the NFL. Started with the Rams. I was born in LA, so they were college sweethearts in New Mexico. But then my dad got drafted to LA, and
Okay.
I was born in LA, in Los Angeles. Played a short while in the league, and then we went back to Albuquerque, where I was raised, and went to high school and college. So no, great upbringing. As I think sometimes about what may have led to, I felt like I was an angry teenager, and I'm not sure why, and led to some of my errant behavior. But I was bullied quite a bit as a child. I remember,
Hmm.
and I see this now as that has evolved so much, and we have an eye on people who bully other children. But as a biracial kid that didn't look like anybody else,
Hmm.
um, I think I was like an easy target for a lot of kids, going back to elementary and middle school. And, the '70s was like, bullying was an art form back then. It
Hmm.
was just, '70s and '80s. You look back at the movies and how kids were treated, and, what things that were said. And yeah, so you had to like have your defenses up. And I think some of the way I was treated as a youth may have led to some of my, I guess, acting out, if you can call it that, in high school. But they always stressed athletics and academics, and so their message did come back to me as I was ending high school and then getting into college. You sort of circle back all the stuff, all the junk you think your parents are telling you when you're growing up. It does, germinate eventually. It
Yep.
does find a home. And so yeah, sports. I was a standout athlete myself. I got a scholarship for track, and so that got me into college. And then the grades started coming, and then I realized, hey, I can chase my dream. My dream is still alive for vet school. Found my way in.
Were there animals around you as a child? And if so, what kind? Did you have a first pet? Was that sort of an early love for you, these furry things?
Yeah, my mom was a big animal lover, and we always had pets around. So I think I gained an appreciation for animals and the care, the treatment they need from my mother, a very compassionate woman. And yeah, just having pets around, I think, is a big component to to veterinarians, to people that end up becoming veterinarians.
Do you remember your earliest pet?
Yeah, it was an Irish setter. Well, no, I guess my first was a Doberman, and I have very vague memories. You know, when those like you're 4 or 5, you just have those faint sort of memories.
Like flashes.
I,
Mhm.
yeah, flashes. I have some of those with the Doberman, but the dog I remember the most was an Irish setter we got when I was like 8. Her name
What
was
was
Zia.
Zia?
Zia, named after the New Mexican state symbol,
Love
the
it.
Zia symbol. Yeah. Yeah, I have vivid memories of her and also her getting pregnant because we didn't spay her and her having a litter of 9 puppies.
Oh.
So, yeah, circling back to this messaging I am so hardened about, people spaying and neutering their pets and the pet overpopulation problem. And then, of course, the number of animals, healthy animals, I had to euthanize or direct my staff to euthanize as a veterinarian at that shelter. It kills me. It's really what wore me down. So yeah, going back to childhood memories of our own mistake of pet ownership to today, and people don't realize that, talking about a ripple effect, what happens when they allow their cat or dog to go unneutered, how many offspring that leads to, and offspring from them, it's exponential.
Hmm.
And when I have to instruct a 21-year-old kid, to me, a kid who's working at my shelter, to euthanize that healthy dog, that that will wear you down, and them too. That I don't think anyone that age is meant to repeatedly destroy animals, but that's what we deal with in our shelter system in America, mainly because people aren't spaying and neutering their pets.
Is that one of the primary messages you put out? And if so, what other messages do you like to get out there to accompany that in terms of animal and pet care and responsibility?
Right. So yeah, responsibility is probably the biggest word, and it just starts with, well, first, taking on a pet when you're in a position to do so. And I know people could certainly argue, well, homeless people aren't in a position to do that. And I would agree with that. However, I think the support they give one another elevates them above ordinary people going out and adopting or purchasing, buying pets, breeding pets. So I used to see people come in to our shelter, and we'd sometimes have specials, and shelters do this, and you can't blame them. 2 for 1, adopt one, get a second, or tell a friend and get half off or something. And these like specials to come in and get pets. And I was never completely comfortable with that, because you're encouraging people to take on a pet when maybe they shouldn't,
Hmm.
and incentivizing them to come in and do it. And so you really need to think before you take on a pet. Do I have the time, the space, the means? And am I going to follow through with medical care, with spaying and neutering? And just being a responsible pet owner, that would curb so many of the problems we see in this country. And then to breeders, backyard breeders particularly, it's not a place to make money. If you think you're going to do it as a business and make a few dollars on the side, you're not in the end, and you're potentially hurting, these puppies, these dogs are being born into the world when they don't find good homes themselves. So stop that. And then, as it turns to what I do, in my cause for the homeless, uh, I would just ask that people don't judge them. They, any one of us could be them. And I've met so many good people on the streets who just need help. And a lot of us at different times in our lives need help. And some people need a little more help than others. And if there's a way you can help them and show compassion versus judgment, I would ask that people do that.
Coming back to the fact that you're out there and you're doing this maybe every week, would you say? Are you out there every week?
It depends. So people should know that it's not something I do every single day, or it's not my day job. It doesn't pay the bills,
Right.
unfortunately. So I do have a normal job, I guess, quote unquote normal, where I do emergency work a couple nights a week because I've always liked critical care and emergency work and the pace of the action. It's just suited me well. So I do that, and then I work for the movie industry. I ensure best practices for the care of animals on movie sets, and I do a lot of my work with Netflix. So since we hit this whole COVID pandemic, the Netflix work is on hiatus. I'm still doing a little emergency work, and then I just started up doing the street work again. So it just comes when I have some free time or I get a request. Now I've learned just keeping the medical bag in my car is easy because, like so many of us, you're driving, you'll see a homeless person on the street or walking their dog, and then I'll just pull over. So it comes in various forms. I can do a little clinic, I can walk the streets, or when I'm driving my car, I'll sometimes just pull over.
Have you always been a naturally outgoing person, or was there a sort of a barrier for you to get over in terms of feeling comfortable just approaching people?
Uh, yeah, I guess that's funny. I've never been asked that. Outgoing. Um, I guess I do. My personality does sort of skew that way. Uh, I've never had a problem speaking in public or in a public forum or in front of large groups or just walking up to someone and introducing myself. I think I get that from my dad. Actually, he is like a social butterfly and likes talking, and he'll just walk up to anybody. Actually, now that I think about this, I have so many memories of my dad in random places. We can pull up to a gas station, right? And I'll be in the car on the passenger side, 11 years old, and I'll just see him walk over to the other, he'll see someone pumping their gas. He'll just walk over and say, "Ah, how's your day going?" just, and 15 minutes later, when I'm hungry, waiting to go to lunch or something, he'll finally get back in the car. So
With a new
yeah,
friend.
yeah, with someone he just met, new friend, exactly. So maybe some of that comes from that. But no, I've never had a problem approaching people and talking and making friends.
I admire that. What happens to you on the inside when you go out and you've really made a connection with somebody? You know you've helped their pet. You know by helping their pet, you've helped them. What happens to you internally? Do you have days when it hits you harder, the impact that you're having? I mean, you may literally change that person's life with that one interaction.
There's a range of emotions. I've surprisingly some days I feel guilty when I walk away because I I have such a fortunate life, and some of it's just good fortune and good luck and good parents and just you know being born in America, right? I mean, just the odds of the way our life, the path that our life takes, puts us in a position of good fortune. And for some of these people, they just haven't had that, and I feel bad. I talk to them and I hear their story, and maybe they were abused growing up. They didn't have good parents in their lives to direct them or guide them. Yeah, I just think, well, I'm so lucky, and um, I wish I could do more for them. In a lot of instances, I know helping their pet probably is huge to them, but I walk away thinking I wish I could help them get a job or get into a place to live. And I can't solve everyone's problems in a moment, I know, but I do know that my gift is treating animals, and I'm giving them a piece of that gift in that moment. And I'm sure it is for a lot of them a big help. And maybe as much as helping their pet in that moment, I think it gives them, like, it restores some faith in them that people are still good. Have had them tell me that before, that they do. A lot of these people still get hassled and mistreated. One time I was on the streets and kneeling down treating the pet, someone spit in our direction driving by in their car, someone threw food at us one time. So they're still marginalized and mistreated, and I hate that. So um yeah, sorry. I think on some of these moments, and I get upset when I see them mistreated, and I feel guilty at times. But I think when I walk away, they know their pet is in a better position, in a better place, and I've taken them, maybe hopefully, out of momentary suffering, maybe long term suffering. But for the person, I think, yeah, they think, well, there are good people, or humanity isn't all bad. And I like knowing they're thinking that.
I've given a lot of thought to this type of work that you're doing. And I think one of the biggest gifts you're giving these people is that they feel seen and heard.
Yeah.
And it's authentic. It's authentic. It's not manufactured. It sounds like it's truly coming from your heart.
Yeah, I like to think so. It comes from a good place. It's a genuine place. I've never had any agenda. For the longest time, people didn't even know I was really doing this. Um, and it's out of my own pocket. I just set aside some of my income to buy supplies and medicines, and yeah, it's just my own little. Well, for a while, it was my own little private cause. It's gotten much bigger lately, and for good reason, I guess. But yeah, they do just they want to feel like people. Um, they want to feel like they're part of society, or people notice them. And I don't cut our time short if I don't have to. I've spent upwards 2 hours with one person just
Wow.
sitting next to a next to a dumpster in an alley talking, um, and listening to them. I give them every courtesy that I would give any client that walks in, any paying customer that walks into the clinic. Because in that moment, next to that street light or next to that dumpster, that is my clinic, and I treat them like any client.
I love that. It kind of makes me think of the concept of a dojo in karate. Your dojo is wherever you are, where you do your work.
Or your church is wherever you're preaching, or
Yeah.
spreading faith. So yeah.
I forgot to ask you about the Street Vet show. Is that still happening? And if so, where would people see that? It's a Canadian broadcast, is that right?
Yeah, it's in Canada. It's in parts of Eastern Europe, and it is still airing. It's on broadcast TV, so to my knowledge, it's not streaming anywhere, which makes it hard for my own friends and family and people here in the States to watch.
And the program is called The Street Vet, is that right?
It's called The Street Vet. Yeah. So when I left the shelter, I started working in Hollywood as that sort of movie set expert for animals. That one day intersected a producer who was, asking about what I did and some of my passions, and he thought, "Well, that's a docuseries, that's a TV show."
Mhm.
So it turned into a show, and yeah, it's airing in different parts of the world. People often think, "Well, you probably made a ton of money from your reality show." The answer to that is no, and most people don't in the reality space, especially with one season, airing in Bucharest or something. I've made no money from the series, and that's fine. It was a passion project, and I'm grateful that it's an awareness piece, and it's out there, and it may lead to season two, or something here in the States. But the best part was my brother and I shot it together. So he works in TV,
That's
and he
cool.
put together. Yeah, he got the film crew together. He came out to California. We only shot in California because I'm only licensed here, and like any medical
Mhm.
professional, you can only practice in the state you're licensed. So we just skipped, to all the major cities: San Diego, Orange County, LA, up the coast to the Bay Area, and we just shot and captured all these amazing stories.
How gratifying. And just to be able to put it out there. And you never know, maybe some Quan copycats will happen.
I would love it. The more people that want to do this, um, the better. And people should know that I am not the only one who's doing this. I see these comments on social, you're a hero, and God has a special place for you, and it makes me feel a little uncomfortable because there are others that do what I do, and I'm just doing something that I feel compelled to do, that in some ways almost obligated to do. I do believe that as a medical professional, I have a responsibility to give back. And, for me, to dentists, to physicians, if we're in a position to do so, I think we have a responsibility to do so. So this is just my way of giving back.
I have one final question for you, and then I want to ask where people can find you online so they can follow you on social media and stuff. The final question is, what do the words "another door opens" mean to you?
I love that saying. For me, reflecting back on my life, when I think about doors that are opening, and to me, I would translate that as new opportunities, new challenges, new people, relationships into your life. Those are doors, I think. I think some doors we push open. They just don't open themselves.
Mhm.
For me, that was vet school. I mean, vet school just doesn't fall in your lap. You don't get to and through vet school or a program like that just because the door slides open. You have to push it open and
Mhm.
keep pushing in some cases. And then other times, doors, they sort of magically open themselves and present wonderful opportunities. And that was probably the street work for me. Had I probably not been a shelter vet, I don't know if I would have started, if my eyes would have been open and I would have started doing the street work. So those doors just sort of open themselves. But the question I ask myself when it comes to this saying is, and understand that I'm more a science guy than a spiritual guy. When you hit the finish line, when you reach the end of your life and you're looking back on all those years previous, I wonder and ask myself, would you still end up in the same place had certain doors not opened? Meaning, are we sort of destined to eventually end up where we're supposed to end up, regardless of what path we take in the short term, right?
Mhm.
I mean, would if I wasn't a delinquent, would that have still led to vet school and some of the other things I've done? Or was I just destined to be a vet? Was I destined to help you know people on the streets with their pets? I don't know. I think that's the more interesting question to me is, what does it look like when it's all said and done? But yeah, I've had wonderful doors open for me, and they continue to open sometimes just because of good karma, I guess, or sometimes because I am determined to make that door open.
Yes. I love that there's just so many directions you can go with the interpretation of that phrase. And I know some people just don't like it at all. And that's why I'm just curious to ask it sometimes because it can lead to really interesting places, which it just did with your answer. So I think you've posed a thought provoking question. Where can people find you online and follow you? Where are your social media platforms? And how can you develop a whole new set of friends through this podcast?
Admittedly, I'm a social media amateur, and my brother helps manage a lot of this for me, thankfully, because I know in this day and age, it's just a big part of the awareness and donations or galvanizing other people. But Instagram is probably the primary place at Dr. Kwan, DrKWANE, and at the Street Vet on Instagram, and then Facebook the same. So, um, yeah, we do postings of our stories and people I still meet on the streets actively today. And they've proven, I guess, to be inspiring to a lot of people, which I love. And hopefully that will encourage more giving.
Remember, the idea behind this Another Door Opens podcast is to open doors, open hearts, and open minds. Everyone has a story to share and lessons that we can learn from them. Every week, you'll meet someone new and interesting here to download some of their life insights. I mean, why not? Also, please continue to download the podcast, share it with friends, and hop onto iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe to it. If you've enjoyed it, please take a few minutes to give it a 5-star review and share it with your friends. You can follow the Another Door Opens podcast online at Podcastado on Instagram and Twitter. That's at podcastado. Before I share my story of another door opening today, I want to thank Eric Brown, who made those funky beats in Los Angeles. And thank you to Jonathan Raz, who edited the podcast from Berlin. And to my guest, KWANE Stewart, thank you for sharing your love of animals and your commitment to service by caring for these sweet pets, and in doing so, lifting the spirits of their owners too. Okay, I told you guys that at the end of each episode, I'd share a story of another door opening in my own life. Today, I want to share a story from 2013. I was moving cross country from Chicago to Los Angeles. I didn't have a job set up and I didn't know a lot of people. I told myself, if any friend of mine had an LA-based friend who was willing to meet me, I'd say yes to that. So my friend Christiana in Chicago said to meet her friend Mike. He was familiar with both Chicago and LA and could answer questions about the city and what was where. So I met Mike, who generously answered a ton of questions. Time passed, and then I got a call. Christiana's friend Mike called to say that he had a friend, David, who had a friend, Annette, who was looking for a tenant. That ended up being the place I moved into for my first lease in Los Angeles. And not only was it a bargain for what I got, but I made a lasting friendship in the deal with my landlord, Annette. That was a great big door. And with it, I could hear my new life in Los Angeles, though still very uncertain, say to me, welcome. Okay, hop on Instagram. Tell me in the comments about a door opening for you. And thank you for being here. I'll see you guys next time. Love you. Bye.